Hi, guys, and welcome back to our Women in Technology speaker series. Today, I'm really excited to be interviewing Regina Moran, International CEO and Non Executive Director of National Grid, Britain's electricity system operator. Regina has forged a highly successful career in technology, having previously held global leadership roles at both Vodafone and Fujitsu. Regina has had a fascinating career, so I really look forward to hearing more. And so if you want to start, Regina, just by introducing yourself to our listeners, maybe giving a little background overview, that would be great.
Thanks, Molly. Well, delighted, and thanks so much for asking me. I feel humbled with that description of myself there. I guess, I mean, you covered a bit of it, but I started out doing electronic engineering. I went to CIT and WIT, so I went the IoT route. And then I got a job pretty soon after that, a very technical job. And then I took a turn into management when I was about 27, even though it was technical management. So I started moving a little bit away from pure technical. Did an MBA in 2000, which was a bit of a game changer for me, actually. I wanted to lead an organization, but I needed to understand more about finance and marketing and the other disciplines. So that led me actually to becoming CEO of Fujitsu in Ireland. I went on then to become CEO of Fujitsu UK in Ireland, and then I did a European role, and I moved to Vodafone almost 3 years ago now. And then most recently, I was very excited and honoured to join the board of the National Grid Systems Operator. I had been on the board of EirGrid about 5 years ago, which was a great honour as well. And it's quite a technical role, and it's really interesting to be part of the energy sector. So I guess I've kind of been in the technology sector, the telecommunications sector. I started life in the manufacturing sector, and now I'm kind of in the energy sector. So certainly engineering can take you to lots of interesting places.
Yeah, you've covered
And
a wide variety.
a wide variety. So there's no limits, I think, is if you have an engineering qualification.
That makes for an exciting career though. So there's a lot to cover, but if we just take it back then to, obviously I'm studying engineering myself, so we'll be interested in it. But a lot of our listeners, of course, are undergrads. So we'd love to hear a bit about your university experience. Like, even this is the Women in Tech series. So even specifically kind of how you found maybe being a female studying STEM at university, um, anything that stood out to you in your university years.
Yeah, well, I'm a lot older than most people listening. When I decided to do electronic engineering, it was a bit of a shock to everybody, including the teachers in my school, family, and so forth, because it was quite a new um, qualification at the time, electronic engineering, particularly microprocessors. Um, a guy came from Waterford to a careers talk, actually, to our school. Now, I went to an all-girls secondary school. We didn't do physics or honours maths. So I kind of felt, well, maybe I was kind of excluded. When he said, no, I said, if you start and go to an IoT, you can lead to the full qualification without having those two. But I did find, really honestly, Molly, when I went to college first, obviously a lot of males in the class, they'd all done physics and honours maths, and I felt I was very far behind. So I had to work extremely hard at the start to catch up. It was also a bit of a culture shock, because obviously if you've gone to an all-girls school and you end up in an engineering class, as many people might have experienced, it is a bit of a culture shock. So I had to kind of get over that. Now, I was very interested in sport, all forms of sport, bit of a tomboy, I guess. So that was a help in terms of being able to break into conversations about who'd won what match at the weekend. So it was a bit of an icebreaker. But I did find the first 6 months in particular hard going. And then after that, I just loved it. I loved the challenge. I loved the diversity in the class, actually, and the different characters, and I loved the course. So I think, for people that are undergraduates that might be struggling a little bit at the start, my advice would be to kind of stick with it. It does get better.
Yeah.
And I've never looked back, and it's been an amazing journey, and it wouldn't have been possible without sticking with engineering.
Okay, yeah, there's some very positive words. I'd have to agree with most of them though. Just the getting on with it. It's definitely a shock at the start, but once you kind of brush past that, it's your new normal. But so you went into a technical role then after engineering, and at what point did you decide? You said you did an MBA in 2000. So kind of what was the driving force behind that? Would you have any advice even for someone who might be in a technical degree now but hoping to more branch into the intersection of business and tech? Do you think an MBA is something you'd recommend?
Yeah, well, I suppose the driving force for me was, I guess, my lack of understanding of, financial marketing, the other disciplines.
Yeah.
I did a couple of intros. I did distance learning with Harriet Watt, and I did a certificate in organizational behavior and a certificate in finance because I needed to matriculate. But actually, it was good because it gave me great grounding in finance going into the MBA. But I wanted to lead a company, and I think I needed to understand, all of the different parts of the company to be able to lead. So that was my driving force. I reckon, what helped me a lot though, and I was thinking about this in terms of the question, was having, at that stage, I had led people. I'd been a manager myself, I'd led people, I had experience working, and I think I got a lot out of the MBA because of that. I would recommend anyone do an MBA. Not so sure it's something that, for me personally, and this is just an opinion, that I would do immediately after an undergraduate course. I think, going out into the working world, as it were, and experiencing working in teams and the human dimension to work, actually, as opposed to the technical dimension, is great when then you go in and you study things like motivation theories or, marketing plans. You've got a kind of a concept of what all that actually is in the real world, which I found very helpful.
Okay, so so it's interesting here you'd recommend kind of gaining a bit of professional experience and then potentially going back. When you went into your first technical role after university, did you find that you actually used the technical skills you'd learned at college, or, is it, I like everyone does say, you learn a problem solving mindset, which I'm sure is applicable in most professions, but did you use the technical skills? We always wonder that
Yeah,
if we're doing anything worthwhile.
it's actually, it's interesting actually, Molly. I actually did. Now, my first job was in a company down in Cork, and I had to set up test processes and a whole test line and test machinery. And, I think you needed to understand
Yeah,
to be
that's
able to do
cool.
that. And, to be really honest. And then my second job was working, it was like a dream job, working on these supercomputers, very large mainframes, testing and debugging those. And you needed quite an in-depth knowledge of technical problem solving, but at a kind of a very they were both very technical jobs, and I think you did use that. But actually reflecting, even today, when I'm in a situation with a customer and they're outlining, their need to transform maybe their business digitally, the fact that you actually understand the fundamentals of computing, technology is a huge help to be able to drive that conversation forward and even lead those conversations. So even today, I would say, even though, I don't do any really hands-on, testing, fixing, technical
Mm,
debugging, most businesses, I mean, there's a huge overlap now between all sectors and technology because everyone's trying to digitalize their business, and those
optimizing.
skills are
Yeah.
very relevant.
Yeah. So you've definitely covered a lot of different roles, probably worked on many different projects. Is there anything, it's a hard question, is there any job or project that stood out to you as the highlight to date? Or is that too tricky?
Yeah, actually, there's probably two that I can think of. One is when I worked on the mainframe computers, the supercomputers, I specialized in floating point units, and they were really, really tricky.
Mm,
And the thing about any problem is you have to make it deterministic in order to solve it. So you had to come up with a killer floating point instruction in order to recreate the problem. And it used to be such a kick when you'd send it out and you'd maybe find, some problem. Like these were 48 layer glass ceramic boards. So you had to use scopes and that to look at them, obviously, and to find. But when you found that problem and it went out to the production line, um, and came back and you tested and it was fixed, it was a great feeling that and you could
super
have spent
satisfying.
maybe 2.5, 3 weeks on this thing. So that was one, that, and it was, and then you knew it was fixed whereas human dimension problems can be a lot more complex. It
Yeah.
was fixed and you moved on to the next one. But my favorite, well, one of my favorite jobs, and I've been blessed with having loads of really good teams, was when I went to the UK and I was CEO of the Fujitsu business over there. You know, I ended up, you know, meeting rear admirals and meeting very senior politicians and all sorts of. I was in 10 Downing Street, so I used to pinch myself every so often and kind of go like, this is kind of this is kind of amazing to a relatively small person from Tipperary to be in the middle of all this. But I love the diversity of that job and the size of it and the complexity of it, and the team that I had were amazing as well. So that was probably my favorite kind of big job. But there was something very satisfying about fixing floating point units as well.
I do get that though. You see the end result straight away and you know that it's
Done.
very satisfying. Another thing, sorry, I noticed from your LinkedIn was that you have been president of Engineers Ireland. Was it 2014 potentially?
Yes,
Yeah.
2014, 2015. Yeah.
What was your role involved with Engineers Ireland? Do you want to just maybe tell some of the listeners the motivations behind Engineers Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, Engineers Ireland is a fantastic organisation. I think they've probably got about 22,000, maybe 24,000 members now. And the idea is to illustrate the importance of engineering to society and how engineering can help us solve some of the great global challenges, and raise the profile of engineering and have a voice for engineers in the country. So, you know, it's been around. I think at that time it was 178 years old,
Right.
and I think I was the third female president in 178 years. So
Right.
that was kind of cool. But the year that I had was the most amazing year, Molly. It was slightly unreal because I went all over the country, you know, to loads of different events. I visited my original secondary school. I had this big chain of office, which the younger kids in particular thought were really bling, like really cool. I went back to WIT, I went back to CIT, I chaired the conference. I ended up speaking in One Great Georgia Street, which is the Institution of Engineers in London. I delivered my presidential address there. And it was just a whirlwind, actually. It was an extremely busy year. And you're just going around, and my theme, not surprisingly, was women in engineering. So I went visiting very small children, you know, to just show them that, you know, engineering does some amazing things in the world, all the way, you know, to undergraduates and postgraduates. So, and into, you know, into work life as well. So it was a great opportunity as a female president, to really promote the fact that there are no barriers to girls entering STEM, and in particular engineering. So it was a massive opportunity and a huge honor to lead such a, you know, very prestigious organization with such a long history.
Yeah, no, wow, that's an extreme achievement to be asked to be the president. Very impressive. Moving sorry to your current role. So you are currently non-executive director with National Grid, which is probably different to some of the other industries you've been involved in. But from an energy systems point of view, I just think it's fascinating. It's a fascinating industry to be involved in currently. Do you think, like, what do you kind of envision for the industry? Do you think there's a need for innovation?
Oh, it's massive, Molly. Yeah, I mean, actually, I've only been involved since August, but I was previously almost 5 years on the board of EirGrid. And even in that intervening time, I finished that role when I went to the UK, actually, because I had just too much on. The amount of change that's happened in the intervening 5 years is unbelievable. And, you know, the National Grid's kind of one of our big ambitions is net zero, which is, you know, zero carbon by 2025 on the grid. Now that poses massive challenges in terms of security of supply and stability of the system, because, you know, renewables are fantastic, whether it's the huge wind farms in Scotland or the solar panels in Skegness, but they're volatile compared to fossil fuels. So to be able to run the system, run the operation, is going to require, you know, huge technological advances, actually, and that's going to, you know, involve lots of players in the industry. And actually, it impacts Ireland as well, because we have an east-west interconnector, which, when I was on the board of EirGrid, we built and deployed that, so it connects to the electricity system in the UK. So I see energy and the future of renewables as kind of borderless. It's important for the world.
Yeah.
And all the energy systems are becoming interconnected anyway. So it's a huge ambition for the National Grid ESO, but it's also a huge ambition, I know, for EirGrid. And I like the really cool ad they have on the television at the moment about it. But it isn't just an ad. It's something that the world needs energy systems operators and energy participants to deliver on.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely a really cool place to be involved. And yeah, I think a lot of people, even in my class, would be interested in kind of getting involved in it because it is such a fast changing thing, as you were talking about.
Well, it's really interesting, actually, just to encourage everybody that in the National Grid ESO, and if you want to look at it online, ESO is Electricity Systems Operator, and that's the part that we work in. I mean, the most senior engineering people are female.
Wow.
An Irish girl called Roisin, they call Ro, and another girl called Katie, Katie O'Neill. So they are the most senior people in that organisation. So that's really encouraging, I think, for people.
Okay, amazing. Actually, on that question, one question we ask a lot of the guests in this series is, like again, maybe a bit tricky, but is there any advice you'd have specific kind of to a female who's hoping to break into the world of technology? Now, whether that's an undergrad kind of looking at what's next, or even someone younger, in school, just yeah, any advice really.
Yeah, I'm always I'm always nervous about handing out advice because I'm still learning what I want to be myself. Actually, I came across the notion, and I looked this up actually. Called ikigai is the notion of, if you can find, and it's the Japanese philosophy, and it's about your reason for being, actually. So that the perfect job is if you find that intersection between what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. So it's quite practical. And that's called ikigai, which is your reason and your purpose for being. In order to get there, though, and I'm actually still on that journey myself. You need to kind of back yourself and try anything, get a foot in the door in your target organization, and kind of get in there doing pretty much anything, and then work your way into the job that you really want within that organization. I think the other thing I'd say is to back yourself and kind of believe in yourself. I think Henry Ford said, if you believe you can, or if you believe you can't, you're right. So I always say that to people. And then the last thing I'd say, and I think, I've had ups and downs in my career. It's not a straight line. Maybe in some of the career books, that's what it looks like. It's not a straight line. It's a bit of a twisting road. So you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to kind of go with the flow. One door closes, another door might open, and keep scanning the environment to look for opportunities. And then you don't have to be 100% of what they're looking for to get the job. My first job as a manager, I was a rank outsider. I still pinch myself and think, I don't know why they selected me, but it got me on the road to management. My point is, if I'd have looked at it and said I needed all of those things that they asked for and didn't go for it, I never would have got it.
Yeah.
So there is that, just kind of backing yourself. And then if you don't get that, just be open, scan the environment again and see what else is out there, and really be adaptable.
Okay, wow, some very honest words. They're, yeah, definitely going to stick with us. But the last question then actually, aside from, of course, like technical skills that are necessary in the industry, what would you kind of look for in a graduate now who's maybe or an undergrad who's hoping to apply to a graduate role? What would you look for, kind of even the soft skills that you'd see in a great leader, something that you think people should kind of keep in mind, with regards to?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, well, the first thing I always look for is enthusiasm and energy.
Okay.
I know that might sound obvious, but sometimes people are very nervous, and they just should let their energy and enthusiasm out. The other thing that's really important, I think, in leadership is listening, and listening to understand and not to just respond, if you know what I mean. So listening when you're with people and being present and in the moment with people is really important. And for people to demonstrate that, I think is really important. A huge one for me is integrity, and building trust. And that allows you then to kind of have empathy with people and situations. I remember I went on a leadership course. It's a long time ago, but I still remember you were asked two questions on the course, which I kind of still ask myself. And one of them was, how do people experience you as a leader? And the second one, which was trickier, was, how do people experience themselves in your presence?
Mm.
And I think if people think about that, when you're with people, because people lead in all sorts of ways, on teams, in DramSocs, in, this society, there's all sorts of leadership. It's not just about being in an organization. And how do you leave people feeling? Do they feel energized and motivated and good about themselves? So I think if you can give energy to people in any situation, then that's one of the important traits for leader.
Okay, that's some good food for thought, I think. Yeah, that'll be sticking with us. But I think we'll leave it there just because I don't want to take up any more of your time. You've already, sure, you've a very busy schedule, very good to come in on your Tuesday night. But yeah, no, that was some really good advice, and it was really nice to hear your journey. Very inspiring, impressive career. So yeah, guys, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much again, Regina, for coming on. And we will be back again in 2 weeks with our next speaker. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.